All right, so we did hashing over history this morning. We had Brad Minnick, and welcome back now for History at Noon. And I always start this out by saying that I am Tom LeClaire. I am the Clayton historian, and we're have a partnership with 4 organizations. We got myself as the historian's office, the Thousand Islands Museum, which they have the ownership of the Hashing Over History and History at Noon programs, and we're also working with the Sesquicentennial, the 150th, and we're working with, and just so happens to be today, we got Julie, but it's the Opera House. So the 4 of us are coming together to bring you these wonderful programs. Today we do have Julie. A lot of people know Julie. If you don't know her, you're going to get to know a little bit more about her. I do know that Jeff, her husband, and Julie, and myself, we all did military careers. We were born and raised in this area. Well, I can't say that you were born and raised here, but we left the area for a lot of years in the military, and we loved Clayton, like Brad was talking earlier, and we've come back to Clayton. I now live 2 miles from where I grew up. I can't say the same for you two, but it's got to be very close. I'm rambling. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie. You got the program.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Julie Garnsey. I'm the executive director here at Clayton Opera House. Getting ready to start my 9th year as the director. Wow. I did not grow up here. I actually grew up 3,000 miles away on the other coast. My husband grew up here. We met when we were in the military. I was in for 24 years and he was in for 26 years. So I'm happy to do this presentation, and I hope that you enjoy what I have to tell you. I did type notes because I can't keep all of this in my head. And there's some very interesting facts about the Opera House and the history of what has happened here, how the building came about, and the different organizations that have been involved with the Clayton Opera House, this building. So the cornerstone was laid in 1903. You can see the cornerstone at the corner of Riverside Drive and Merritt Street. You can see on the building where it says 1903. The building was completed in July of 1904. The architect was Frank T. Lent. The builder was George R. Kenyon. The seating capacity at the time was originally 750 people. We now seat 512 people. So you can tell there's a little difference in building codes from then to now. There are some historic features about the Opera House. The stage is raked at an 18-to-1 pitch. The balcony railings are historic. The metal ceilings, the light fixtures are historic. There was a clock and bell tower that was put on in 1905. And then the Muskellunge Weatherbane, which most people can see, that was put in the 1920s. The town hall owner is the town of Clayton, and we are the Thousand Islands Performing Arts Fund that manages the upper 3 floors of the Clayton Opera House, and that started on May 5th of 2003. There was a dedication in perpetuity as a community and performing arts center on April 9th of 2003. The cornerstone of the Opera House, as I said, was laid in 1903. The building was completed in July of 1904. It was constructed on the corner of Water Street, now Riverside Drive, and Merritt Street, which was the site of the once thriving Johnston shipyard where the famous steamer St. Lawrence was built. Its architect was Frank T. Lent, originally from Gananoque, who had an office in Clayton with George E. Morse. George Kenyon was its builder. He was the grandfather of Mayor Dale Kenyon, Damon Kenyon, Anne Kenyon Starrett, and Gordon Ciro Jr. The edifice was electrified and heated by steam from the pumping station across the street, which is now the Rotary Building. In 1933, the boiler, which burned peat coal, was installed in the basement of the Opera House, and in 1938, the fuel was changed to oil. The pumping station and coal sheds also were constructed by George Kenyon. The Opera House was built for the town of Clayton at the cost of $15,000. Before they could complete the building, being low on funds, they made an arrangement with the members of the Masonic Lodge number 296 and with Hollister B. Dewey. The Masons agreed to pay for the cost of the 3rd floor, this room. provided they could use that floor for their meetings, and they did for a very long time. H.B. Dewey agreed to finish the basement, provided he could have a long-term lease for to use for his furniture store and undertaking business. So the basement had a furniture store, it had an undertaking business down there, along with many other things. We'll cover that. In 2000, the Masons moved out. Their lease had been up with Clayton in 1993. It didn't get renewed, but they remained here until they could unite with another lodge. And at the time, their youngest member was 64 years old. And being there was no elevator in the building at that time, they found it difficult getting up and down the steps. So they joined the Masons, eventually joined the Masons in Depauville and stored their furniture at the lodge in Chaumont, sorry. I didn't mean to say Chaumont. I live out there. But I hear now that they're all in the Mason Lodge with Chaumont now too. So there's not a Mason Lodge in Depauville that I know of. The rake stage. So the Opera House had seating capacity of 750 at the time. It was the largest stage in Jefferson County. It was called a rake stage because it sloped toward footlights, as did the scenery. So the easiest way to explain it is, if you've ever heard upstage, downstage, the upstage is higher than the downstage, and that's because the audience is flat. So if the audience, sometimes in newer theaters, audiences are tiered, so they're level, there's different levels. Ours is a flat audience, so it helps people see what's going on at the back of the stage along with what's going on at the front of the stage because the audience is flat. So that was the purpose of that. There were 5 sets of scenery that was kept in the basement where 5 dressing rooms were located. So the dressing rooms were originally located in the basement, and the sceneries came from the Ackerman studio in New York City. The clock tower. The clock tower of the town hall was donated by the Civic Club in 1905, and it was a 4-sided clock which struck every half hour. It was donated by the H.B. Dewey family. Also in 1905, a bell was donated to the village of Clayton by the late A.H. Vandergrift of Washington, D.C., who had a palatial summer home on Long Rock Island. The bell, operated by the clock mechanism, rang the hours for a great many years. During World War II, the clock was removed so the tower could be used as an observation tower. A walk around with a protective railing was built on each side of the tower. Men were airplane spotters at night, and women were airplane spotters during the day. After the war, it was discovered someone had donated the gears, counterweights, and other parts of the clock to the scrap drive as another patriotic gesture. That's why there's no clock tower up on the Opera House. There have been people talking about doing fundraisers to put the clock tower back up. I would love to see that happen. Now, let me see. But the bell was preserved, and the bell is actually down in the town offices in the basement. You can see it if you go in to pay your bills. There's a bell. That was the original bell that was up there. The Weatherbane. In 1920, according to Grace Lewis Frank Ryman, a polished brass Weatherbane which depicts the traditional large fish of the area, the muskellunge, was crafted by Carl Frank, founder of the Frank Snowplow Company. At that time, Mr. Frank had a vulcanizing and automobile tire sales business on Riverside Drive, where the U.S. Customs Office was located. It was donated to the village of Clayton by Augusta Lottie Mann in memory of her husband after he died. The Weatherbane was an aid to fishermen, showing them which way the wind was blowing. It had its first home on top of the Walton House, where Mr. and Mrs. Mann had a suite when they came to Clayton for fishing trips. The hotel was located on the corner of Riverside Drive and James Street, where Mars Plaza is now located. After the Walton House was torn down in 1930, the Weatherbane was placed on the roof of the Opera House, so it's been up there since 1930. Talk a little bit about performers. Everybody knows May Irwin, should. She had a lot of properties here. She made her home in the Thousand Islands, as we all know. She fell in love with the St. Lawrence River when performing in Ogdensburg as a teenager. From the 1880s, she was one of the biggest and most popular names on the vaudeville stage and considered the most successful comedian, actress, and singer of her time. May was a favorite of Presidents Theodore Roosevelt, William McKinley, and Woodrow Wilson. On August 14, 1905, May Irwin, with her troupe from New York City, presented the play Mrs. Black is Back and filled the Opera House with approximately 1,000 people, the largest crowd ever to attend a performance here. She kept the audience laughing and was at her best performance with comic songs and cakewalks. An article appeared in the Watertown Daily Times, May 4th of 2003, concerning the smallpox epidemic in 1901, gripping the Watertown area. At the time, the newspaper reported church attendance in Watertown on January 20th was very visibly affected by the epidemic, with some few doubtless using the epidemic as a good excuse. Indeed, nobody was using the excuse on the next evening when Entertainment May Irwin filled the City Opera House. First entertainment. The very first entertainment in the Opera House was presented by the Travelers Club in early January of 1904. It consisted of a quartet and an elocutionist. The first big dance held here was the Fireman's Ball on February 10, 1904, with music provided by Whittier and Lapetre's Orchestra. Some local talent from 1904 to the 1950s. On December 30th of 1904, a vaudeville show was put on by the Boys Club of Clayton. 1908 to 1909, George Haley gave dance lessons here for approximately 360 over a one-year period. 1909 to 1910, Clayton Band gave concerts for 2 summers under the direction of Thurston T. Lewis. So there was a community band back then as well as a community band now. 1912 to 1920, the Daru Minstrels, consisting of 36 men, a 24-piece band, and an 8-piece orchestra, performed every spring for a period of 8 years. There's nothing on that page. April 19th of 1913, a concert under the direction of Miss Viva Frame was performed here. Charlotte Kenyon sang Swinging in the Treetops, and Harriet Kenyon played a piano solo. The Two Larks, and also a duet, which is Frolic with Vera Morse. Charlotte and Harriet were Del Kenyon's aunts, and Harriet was Gordon Searle's mother. 1913 to 1914, Solar's Orchestra, comprised of Clarence Castleman, George Duford, Thurston Lewis, Frank McKinley, Thurman Solar, and an imported drummer, performed for 2 seasons. May 20th, 1925, Miss Ella S. Robinson and Miss Viva Frame were accompanists. Miss Robinson was a popular piano teacher and the sister of Edson E. and Ray M. Robinson, who had the well-known Edson E. Robinson bookstore on Public Square in Watertown. The mid-1930s, old-fashioned barn dances were popular. They were popular events held at the Opera House. Local bands played for them, and they decorated with bales of hay and had live pigs wandering around to create a farm atmosphere. 1939 to 1940, prior to World War II, the Kings and Queens of Rhythm Band, led by Stanley Wilcox Hungerford, trombone, performed in the Opera House. Other participants were Gordon Searle on the cornet, Leroy Cuppernall on saxophone, Mary Kittle Cuppernall on piano, James Hungerford, baritone horn, Lois Jean Hungerford McFarlane on the saxophone, Hubert Morse drums, and Grace Louise Brinkman Ryman on the clarinet. According to Lois Jane, they played after basketball games for proms and parties. 1940 to 1950, Glock's Orchestra played for the annual Fireman's Ball for a period of 7 or 8 years. The Fireman's Ball was a very special event. The dance was always preceded by a family-style dinner provided by volunteers and served in the pump house across the street. March 17th, in 1943, the Lions Club Victory Minstrels, under the direction of Bill Michelle, promoted the buying of war bonds and stamps at the time of World War II. Celebrity honor roll. William Danforth was considered one of the greatest comedians on the American stage. He was known especially for his performances in Gilbert and Sullivan and Victor Avery's operas. He and his actress wife Norma Cobb summered in the Thousand Islands for many years before they bought their house on Murray Island in 1926. Dick Monroe, Bill Danforth, and Bill Monroe are grandsons of William and Norma Danforth. Lillian Russell also graced the stage of the Opera House. During the summer of 1934, the Summer Civic Playhouse Productions by Kent S. McKinley signed on Lester Vale as a leading man and director for the Playhouse. He had been a leading movie actor, performed on the legitimate stage, and in later years performed on radio and TV. Still don't know what the legitimate stage is. I guess maybe that's Broadway or something. I don't know what they mean by that. The first tenant. Anybody know who the first tenant was in the Opera House? You didn't know this was going to be a question. Dave?
The library?
The library, very good. The library was the first tenant of the Opera House in 1904. They occupied the second floor. Their utilities were free and their staff members were volunteers. Their only expenses were for books and working materials. It was organized as the Town of Clayton Library under a provisional charter dated June 27, 1904, after efforts were made for having a circulating library in Clayton for 24 years. A group of women met with a representative of the New York State Department of Libraries in the former Hubbard House. The Clayton Women's Civic Club was formed, and they raised $200 with the sum being matched by New York State. They remained here for 22 years. Commercial tenants. The basement of the Opera House has housed many businesses over the year. The previously mentioned Dewey's Furniture Store and Funeral Parlor, and on the same side as the furniture store, the Western Union Telegraph Office opened in 1945 and was managed by 12-year-old Lois Dewey. Other businesses located there were Jeffers Furniture and Dry Goods, Gates Jewelry, Austina's Dress Shop, John Cruzet's Boston Clothing Store, and the Tip Top Diner, which was managed by Ernie and Marion Russell from 1954 to 1975. In the 1920s, Louis Leonard operated a beauty salon on the west side of the basement. Town Hall. The Opera House was referred to also as the Town Hall because it was intended to be used for a variety of community functions such as commencement exercises, the annual Fireman's Ball, Government Employment Office, Youth Center, Radio Club, meetings, etc. The Grand Army of the Republic celebrated their elaborate Memorial Day ceremony here, and large quantities of lilacs decorated the hall. There were several hundred people at one of these ceremonies to honor Harry Couch, who was killed in action on September 30th, 1918 in France. In the 1920s, the Clayton High School used the main floor of the Opera House as a basketball court. Baskets were suspended from the stage and the opposite balcony. The high school at the time was where the municipal building is and was not large enough to handle extracurricular activities. Lois Jane Hungerford McFarlane remembers playing on the girls' town basketball team 1940 to 1942. Grace Lewis Brinkman Ryman recalls walking from the high school to the town hall for classes and band practice. So they had a lot of stuff here for the high school because there wasn't any room for them to do stuff there. Unusual events. The most unusual event, a rather unusual use of the town hall, was for the annual poultry show. Some of you may have heard about this. The late Baptiste Diablo staged a chicken plucking exhibition here. He was considered the champion of Jefferson County and could pluck a chicken in less than a minute. So they used to have chicken plucking champion. There's a song about it. It is true. White's and Franklin's Old Time Medicine Show packed the town hall every time they came. They advertised their wares, which they claimed cured everything from a sore toe to rheumatism to apoplexy. Beginnings. For a town the size of Clayton, it is unusual but impressive to have 3 museums. The Thousand Islands Museum, the Antique Boat Museum, and the Hand Weaving Museum and Art Center, now the Thousand Islands Art Center. The Thousand Islands Museum nurtured all 3 under its charter in the Opera House. At one time, they were all 3 under the Thousand Islands Museum. They have all grown, become independent, thrived, and are now very important in the North Country and nationwide. And they all have their own spaces. Everybody knows the Antique Boat Museum is over on Mary Street, the Art Center is over here on John Street, and the Thousand Islands Museum is over on James Street. The Chamber of Commerce also was housed in the basement of the Opera House from 1970 to 1992 before they moved to their building on 510 Riverside Drive. Under New York State law, the town supervisor is considered to be the custodian of all town buildings. Beginning in 1960, Gordon Searle Jr. became the town hall custodian for 32 years. Under Gordon's reign, there were a number of significant changes to the Opera House. A new roof was completed to preserve the building. The electric system was upgraded. In the late 1980s, a stage lighting system was installed with the assistance of St. Lawrence University. The beautiful original stage curtains were disposed of because they couldn't be fireproofed and uncomfortable. And the uncomfortable wooden bench seats were parceled out to various community organizations. Theater debts from 1950 to 2002. In 1950, the theater company called Thousand Islands Playhouse moved into the Opera House for 5 summers, July through Labor Day. They had a professional acting group from New York City and presented such plays as Streetcar Lady Desire, Design for Living, Arsenic and Lace, Tobacco Road, and 7-Year Itch. During the 1970s, no theater-related activities were held because the Thousand Island Museum was revamping the second floor after the Shipyard Museum and the craft school opened in their new buildings. John Burt, a fifth-generation Summer resident, produced popular plays between 1987 and 1989, including Wind in the Willows, River Song Review, and The Slip of 76, which debuted on July 3rd, 1987. In 1990, Michael Kenny brought comedy shows from his Sackett's Harbor Playhouse to the Opera House. Community theater. During a period of 10 to 15 years, starting in the late 1970s, a group of enthusiastic local teachers and others formed a group called the Thousand Islands Community Theater. They were close to 50 participants, but coinciding with the weekend of the annual Clayton Christmas Parade, this group put on a Christmas play with music which presented a different theme each year. Summer theater. In 1991, the Summer Theater Committee was created by the town of Clayton for the purpose of utilizing the Opera House because no theater groups were using it. The town of Clayton felt these theater productions would appeal to tourists and raise appreciation for the performing arts. The Clayton Chamber of Commerce sponsored the show, kept the books for the Opera House, and sold tickets for the performances from 1991 through 1993. Betty Giles started the Young People's Theater in 1992, and Young People's Theater still exists today, and they still use the Opera House today. In 2002, after a considerable number of meetings, discussions, and negotiations, the Thousand Islands Museum decided to move to a different location so that the Opera House could become a true and vital opera house, a performing arts center of which Northern New York could be proud. The inaugural concert of the Opera House on July 29, 2002 featured the P.I. Tchaikovsky's Bolshoi Symphony Quartet and was a tremendous success. The renovations were completed in 2007, and TPAF has managed the upper 3 floors of the Opera House since that time. TPAF, it stands for Thousand Islands Performing Arts Fund. We're a not-for-profit. We have a DBA as Clayton Opera House. TPAF raised $3.25 million from private donors and grants for the renovation and remains in an agreement with the town of Clayton to manage the Opera House. The town still occupies the basements with their offices. Renovations included a heating and air conditioning system, an elevator, pretty important, major electrical and plumbing upgrades, new bathrooms, state and federal access and egress compliance, and third floor improvements. So there wasn't a handicap lift either. So they installed a handicap lift at the back, regular elevator in the front, so now we're ADA compliant. Also included was an addition to the back of the building needed to house mechanicals, a green room for performers, and dressing rooms. Over 450 individuals and businesses contribute to this project. So the building, not this wall, but the next wall over, the building used to end at that wall, and there was going back this way. And there was like a lean-to where people could go down the stairs. They took that portion and created an actual added to the building so that they could add the green room, the dressing rooms, and third floor offices. So other stuff that has happened since then. In 2018, TPAC received a matching grant from Northern New York Community Foundation of $10,000 for a new lighting system on the stage, and LED lights were installed. The total cost of the project was $36,000, and donors helped to fund the project. In 2019, an upgraded sound system was installed with help from a generous donor who donated the $36,000 required for the project. The sound system saves TPAC approximately $15,000 per year in extra fees required by artists and gives the opportunity to bring in bigger artists to the area. Since the renovations have been completed, the Opera House has been established as a renowned performing arts center in the Thousand Islands region, bringing in nationally known performers. We also rent the hall for weddings, proms, baby showers, conferences, and presenters. Some of our annual performers are the Young People's Theater. They still come every year for a week. They bring in, COVID brought them down a little bit, but the year prior to COVID, they had 120 kids in here from the ages of 5 to 18. They bring them in for a week. They practice for a week for like 5 hours a day, and on Friday they put on a performance. It's phenomenal what they do with these youngsters in 1 week. The first year I was here, I was like, there's no way these kids are gonna put this performance on. And by the end of the week, they've got every line down, their singing is spot on. These are teachers and people that do this, and they do a wonderful job with them. Miss Adirondack pageant, used to be Miss Thousand Islands pageant, they come in every year. Jazz in the Classroom, and the Orchestra in Northern New York has become an annual event for us. We also have the Clayton Community Band, which is considered the resident ensemble of the Clayton Opera House, and they put on 5 performances in a year. Some of the nationally known performers that have been here: Rob Schneider, Judy Collins, the Kingston Trio, Ben Vereen, Clint Black, Tom Rush, B.J. Thomas, Rita Coolidge, Lone Star, Jody Messina, Ralph Stanley, and Blue Highway. That's just to name a few, since the doors have reopened. On March 13th of 2020, the town of Clayton closed the doors to the Opera House due to the COVID-19 pandemic. All of our employees worked from home through the summer, diligently rescheduling performers, contacting ticket buyers, keeping our patrons and audience members informed as much as possible about the status of the Opera House. We are fortunate to receive the Paycheck Protection Program. However, as the pandemic wore on, we found it necessary to furlough staff in early June. By then, we knew we weren't going to have anything in here, at least not until the fall. We were hoping for the fall of 2020. That didn't happen either, unfortunately. In July of 2020, we were allowed back in the building. I was the only one here at the time. But we couldn't put on events because we were waiting for the state and the CDC to tell us. In late October, we brought the staff back with anticipating of having a more normal season in 2021. As we planned and replanned, it became apparent that we were not going to have a normal summer in 2021, and we waited for the arts to be allowed to be reopened. In June 2021, after over 15 months of shutdown, we were able to open our doors to limited capacity audiences. And literally, this is how it went. It was like the last week of May, and they said next week you can open. So we were kind of caught with, what do we do? So we had to become creative and find unique ways to occupy the Opera House and bring people in and keep them safe and help make them feel safe when they came to performances. And we were able to do that. We brought in local performers, we brought in local speakers during that summer, and then in the fall we were able to kind of bring things a little bit bigger. We were still limited because people were not quite feeling 100% safe, but Community Band came back, they played 3 concerts, 10th Mountain Division Band played a concert, so we were able to do some things in the fall, and now we're pretty much coming back to more normal. We were fortunate to receive the second round of Paycheck Protection Program in 2021. Additionally, we received over $144,000 in a Shuttered Venues Operators Grant, and then 2 grants from New York State Council of the Arts, totaling $59,500 through those 2 grants. We also received 2 grants from the John Ben Snow and the Northern New York Community Foundation, a total of $10,000 to install live streaming equipment in the performance hall. So now we have that, and we're able to stream performances. The big thing with that is that we want to stream our arts and education programming, because we do quite a bit of that through the year, where we bring students in from schools. They get to see a live performance on stage, but now we can stream it to everywhere in the North Country as well. So we can expose more children to the arts that they don't necessarily get when they're in school. We're a nonprofit. We're run by a board of directors, 13 to 17 members. We currently have 3 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee, and approximately 70 volunteers. So if you're looking for a place to volunteer, you can always use help. I can put little pictures in here, can't I? Okay. Now I ask. It's always better to ask for forgiveness, right? We do have over 250 patrons every year that donate to our organization, that help us, and we have businesses that help support our shows. This year, we have over 80 events scheduled. That includes our rentals, weddings, performance rentals, and those kind of things. We're partnering with the Thousand Islands Museum. We're happy to have them here for Hashing Over History and History at Noon. That came about because the museum is just a little bit smaller, and they wanted to be able to do it, but still make people feel comfortable, and we're happy that we were able to do that. We have a very active arts and education program that researches Bringington quality performances. We actually have 3 of those programs going on this year, where 2 of them are going to be workshops with students that get to work with these artists, and then they'll get to perform 1 or 2 songs on the stage with the performers. So we would love doing that, because we know the only way the arts are going to stay alive in this region is you got to bring those youngsters in and get them buy-in to continue doing it. Because let's face it, I'm not going to do this forever. I'll do it for a while. Some of our 2022 Performers include Thompson Square, which is country music, Lee Greenwood, big name in country music, 2 Grammy winners, a pop musician, Paula Cole, and a Grammy Bluegrass winner, the Steel Drivers. Paul Poundstone will be back, Glenn Miller Orchestra will be back, Wicked Divas, which is a Broadway singer singing Broadway hits, Ball in the House and New York Voices are both our workshop for students, but they'll also be performing in the evening. We have former poet laureate Billy Collins will be here, David Bromberg, Croce plays Croce, which is Jim Croce's son, and obviously the orchestra in Northern New York. We also have several weddings, performances, and speakers that are on our schedule, including, if anybody's interested, Danny Baker, her book is getting published not next month, in May, and she's gonna come and talk. We just got that on the calendar, so she's gonna come and talk about her book and sell her book, and she's very fascinating. She has a living garden, an edible garden over on Wellesley Island that's absolutely just phenomenal, and the stuff that she's done with it has been pretty cool. So just a couple last thoughts. There was a description of the Opera House found in Clayton's newspaper on the St. Lawrence, which was dated July 29th, 1904. A credit to our town and its enterprising citizens, delightfully situated, elaborately furnished, and as complete as modern conveniences can make it. A seating capacity of 1,200, fine acoustic properties, an ideal assembly hall for conventions. The Opera House can add an aura of respectability to theater and vaudeville productions. And just one last thought, British actor and director Alan Rickman, he says, actors are agents of change. A film, a piece of theater, a piece of music, or a book can make a difference. It can change the world. I feel like we are trying to change our little part of the world here in Clayton with the Opera House. So that's all I have. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
If you mentioned it, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. Why is it called Opera House?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know why it's called Clayton Opera House. Do you?
Well, I don't have the definitive answer, but I know that all the towns and villages had an opera house. It was where they did their presentation. So I think it was just accepted across the region. If you had a place where entertainment was happening, it was the Opera House.
Yeah, there are several that are, you're right, that are named like Smithville Opera House. There's some others in the area that...
There was a previous opera house in Clayton. I don't know the exact location, but as I've been going through the village meetings, it talks about in the 1870s, 1880s, about the Opera House. And it was most certainly not this building. So
Not in the 1800s, because it wasn't here.
It had something to do with the building that St. Mary's Church, old church, they sold their building for the Opera House. So,
That's a good question. Sorry I couldn't answer it
But there were never
definitively.
really operas featured here.
Not really. I mean, I think we've done some light opera. So, and May Irwin really wasn't considered, I don't think she was really considered an opera singer. She was more vaudeville type performer. So, but we have done some. We have recently, since 2014, done some light operas in here. The thing about doing theater in our theater is if you go downstairs, and you're welcome to go down and take a look, the stage is not very large. And with the rig stage, it's difficult to change sets out because now you have to worry about if it's on rollers, you gotta make sure they're wedged and it doesn't fall over and go into the audience, obviously, right? So it creates a bigger challenge to do that. And the wings are not very big to hold extra sets. So if you have to change sets out in between, it can be cumbersome to do something like a theater. Young People's Theater does a great job because they have one set, basically. They have one set that they put up, and that's all there is. So things like that we can do, and we have done in the past. So, yes, sir.
Julie, I think if you do a little more research on it, I would speculate. I'm not the authority, I don't know. But the Opera House cliche was about an image. And in rural America, especially rural New York, where we're so far removed at that time, back in the 20s and the 30s, from cultural centers like New York and the bigger cities, all these small towns and smaller cities building an entertainment center, I think they were very greatly drawn to the Opera House image, so that, and it kind of represented a little higher society culture and entertainment.
You're probably right, you're probably absolutely right.
I think you gotta kind of really back up in history and realize all the other venues that we're aware of today didn't exist back then. And it created that really, really inspirational image of, oh wow, we're more civilized now, we have an opera house.
Right, yeah, you don't have to go to the city to see.
Yeah. I would suspect.
You were probably right. That sounds like a great story, I'll add that to mine. Nobody will ever know whether it's true or not.
Well, I'm amazed, because you do go around other little communities, and there's opera houses all through, you know, not, especially in New England. Kind of.
Right, yeah. Yes, sir.
As far as capacity, I look downstairs there, it's kind of, I don't understand 750 people fitting in there. And then you just said a 1,200 in that one article, but what do they do with them?
Well, and that's a really good question, because with all those chairs sitting down there, I mean, we sit downstairs in the performance hall, there's like 268 in the center, and it's tight. You sit in there and you've got somebody right up next to you, right? So I agree with you. I don't know how they put 1,000 people there. Maybe everybody was standing downstairs. Or, you know, maybe the chairs upstairs in the balcony weren't fixed, and so they stood, or I don't know. I mean, I know you could stand a lot more people in there than seated, but you're right. I can't even imagine being in there with 1,000 people. And think about this too. There was no air conditioning.
Yeah.
You know, so middle of summer, doing a show with 1,000 people, and you're standing in here. I hope the windows are open, but then any noise from outside, and you know, so I can't even imagine trying. I mean, we have air conditioning now, and even with the air conditioning, if we turn it on at the beginning of the day and we put 500 people in there, by the end of the evening, it's hot in there. It's very hot because all those bodies. So, yes, sir.
People were smaller than.
That's true too. They people were smaller than that is, I'm sure, part of it. You're right. People were smaller than. Yep, that's a good point.
Or dirt.
Probably a little bit of both, but we won't go there. Yes, ma'am.
With the anniversary of Clayton and all, and the history of this building, have the Opera House people thought of doing anything with that main floor, of having like a historical costume ball or something that would make the town village just really go nuts for the anniversary?
I would need somebody to coordinate that.
I'm looking for a volunteer. I got my plate full.
The challenge with that is all the other events, and I love the idea. All the other events that are happening, not just with us, but the program through the year, the 150th, all over. How do you fit that in and give people? You're giving them one more thing to try to do. And I know we discussed it a little bit about how we might be able to do something like that, but it does become a challenge trying to keep not giving too much to do. As it is, our season is pretty packed. We don't normally like to do that much in the summer, but just because people have to then make a decision, do I go to this or do I go to that? But the fortunate part about summer is there's so many people in town, even tourists and stuff, that you can give that opportunity. But I mean, it's a great thought, but coordinating it, and we are the Opera House people, 2, me, and a part-time. So there's 4 of us. I mean, we have a board, but most of my board works as well as volunteering their time to be on the board. So it's very challenging to try to pull something like that off. Yes, sir.
Question. So World War II, I've heard observation post. Do you have any stories that you've heard from any seniors that, you know, maybe when they were younger, remembering when they used to, their parents went up and did observation?
I have not heard any of that. That would be great to have somebody that actually had somebody that, you know, one of their relatives that was up there. That would be really cool.
Yeah. So I will say, during World War II, you know, watching out for enemy airplanes. They actually took rotation turns up on top of the Opera House looking for incoming planes, World War II.
Yeah, where we need to put the clock tower back, because they
Yeah.
took the clock tower now because of that, yes.
We may need it for another observation deck.
We might, oh, let's hope not for that. I don't think we have much to fear from the Canadians.
I will add one other thing, I won't put you on the spot, but as the historian, and I go through a lot of old newspapers, there was a significant fire in this building. It started down in the telegraph company area, between the fire and the smoke inhalation. The town supervisor, and I can't remember the year, but it was like 1920. He initially said that the Opera House is gone. I mean, as far as he was concerned, it had to be totally demolished. It ended up not getting demolished, but every wall of every floor had to be replastered and repainted and everything. It was a significant loss to the village back in I'll have to pull that article out.
We'll have to get together, I need to add that to my
Yeah.
talk, I did not realize that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Wow, that's interesting.
Right.
What else? Other questions? Yes, sir.
Was there ever a period of time when the building was non-functional, where they literally, for a year or 2 or 3 years, it was non-used, and they just used the lower floor?
Not that I know of, there was always something in here. Like I said, the Masons were in here till '93, so and they were up here on the 3rd floor. And pretty sure the TI museum was in here for a long time. But not that I know of that it was never just like completely vacant. Since it's been built, I think there's always been something in here. Yes, ma'am.
Julie, maybe I missed it at the beginning of your talk, but did you say who originally paid for the building to be erected?
The town did.
The town.
$15,000 it cost them. And then they ran out of money. So the Masons built this, finished the 3rd floor, and there was a gentleman that finished the basement. As
So
long
the
as they
town,
did.
okay.
Yeah, so the town, and it's always been a town building. It's always been owned by the town. So, yes.
What's your current operating budget for like upcoming year, roughly? Does that?
It's between $400,000 and $500,000. It is. It's increased significantly. We are trying to really become more year-round. We did have a performance scheduled for February of this year, but it was a Canadian, Alan Doyle, and they decided because of the border, they didn't know about the border crossing or anything that was scheduled in February, so he pushed that off to February of next year. So next year we will start in February. We have a show this Friday, Celtic Angels. It's the earliest that we've ever done stuff in here besides movies and, special events and stuff like that. I suspect that in the next several years that will increase. So, and obviously we'll have to hire more staff because, we can only work so many hours in a week and try to pull things off right.
But I think it reflects on, to me, I draw a reference to economic stimulus or economic development. It's an economic engine downtown Clayton.
It absolutely is, and if you talk to anybody, I was just on the phone with Buffy today, and she's like, how full is your house on Friday? I'm like, well, right now we have around 280 tickets sold, so you may want to bring on extra staff. She knows, especially this time of year, people are going to want to come in town, and they want to want to eat before they come to a show. So often, especially in the middle of summer, we'll get phone calls from all the different restaurants, and they will ask us how full our house is, and they know they got to bring on extra staff because people want to come in, they want to have dinner, come to a show. Oftentimes, they'll go out, have a glass of wine or something afterwards too. So it does have a huge impact on the vitalization of downtown Clayton. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know anything about it, but we're talking about thinking of year-round activities. Has it ever been considered, and I don't know if it's cost-effective, to create an independent film movie theater where you bring in first run, the shorts for the Oscars or something that you're not going to see in a mainstream theater? Has that ever been considered? Is it doable?
Anything is doable. We have a big screen that fills the stage, and we have a high-speed projector that was donated to us. So anything is doable. The question with the middle of winter, is there an audience for it? Is there an audience for people to come in? We have done things in the past, like played Phantom of the Opera, a theatrical production via film, and people seem to come to that, but I think even that, there was only about 35 or 40 people in here. So it's difficult to, like our movies that we're doing now, they're events, but the most we've had in any of our movies through the winter that we've done was when we did Elf in December, and we had like 75 people in here. Everything else is somewhere in that maybe 20s, 10s. It's difficult to, I think even in the wintertime, you're still competing with a lot of different things that are going on. The kids are in school and there's activities and just, so we are trying to figure out how that works, but cost effectiveness is very important because I have to have staff here, I have to turn the lights on, I have to, advertise, I have to pay for the movie, so we want to do more and we want to provide that entertainment year-round for people to come in. I mean, our movies are literally $5 to come in and see a movie. So it's not expensive entertainment. We're always trying to think outside the box. What do we do to bring people in and give them something to do through those shoulder seasons, those people that are here year-round? Because it's easy in the summertime. You got all those people that come back from Florida and North Carolina and South Carolina, and then all the tourists, right? So you can put things in here and take the risk that you can pay more for an artist and take the risk that you may or may not fill the house, but your opportunity is larger because there's more people in town. Trying to get people out. I know that in the middle of January this year, when we had that week or 2 weeks long stretch when it was below zero, I did not want to leave my house. It was awful, but that's just, so I get that if it's minus 20 and you're thinking about coming to something, I don't know, do I want to get out, do I want to get out in this weather too? So that's a constant challenge. And we could have a mild winter, but those things, you have to plan them ahead of time. So always thinking about stuff like that. We're always thinking about stuff like that. And taking ideas and, always, people can give us any kind of input. We're trying to do something. So, welcome. Anything else? Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, and like all our presenters, you get the certificate of appreciation for being you're our third History at Noon speaker. So we're a quarter of the way through that program. Hashing over history, we just finished 3/4 of our program. But